Welcome back to The Week in Politics. With me in studio, Sinn Féin Deputy Leader Mary Lou MacDonald and Independent TD Mattie McGrath. And we're also joined from Kilkenny presently by Fianna Fáil Leader Micheál Martin. Now, Bobby Aylward's victory in that Carlow-Kilkenny by-election was particularly sweet for said Micheál Martin, because the conventional wisdom was that his leadership would be in trouble if Fianna Fáil lost again, as they had done in the last by-election in Roscommon, South Leitrim. But in the early hours of this morning, Bobby Aylward did win, and Fianna Fáil's decades-long run of bad luck in by-elections is now over. And as I said, Micheál Martin joining us from Kilkenny. It was a late night, but your man got over the line, Micheál Martin. So that means you're secure at your next parliamentary party meeting, does it?
Well, I would have been secure irrespective of the result last evening, but it was a very good night. It was a late night. It was a very happy day yesterday with the marriage equality referendum success, and also with Bobby Aylward's success. It was a victory for community in the sense that the Aylwards represent the very best of what community life is all about in Ireland. Very strong commitment to public service, and also we got the sense, canvassing on the doorstep, that people simply liked the Aylwards, and particularly liked Bobby. Core decency at the heart of what they are about, and that came shining through in the by-election campaign itself, one which I enjoyed, and great warmth on the doorstep. And I can tell you one thing, Anya, on the doorstep, leadership issues were certainly not an issue.
All right. The interesting thing, of course, is the performance of Ray Nua on 10%, that Fine Gael, if Ray Nua hadn't been in the field, could actually have pulled this one off. Is that something that could be a tip for the general election, do you think, and a pattern that might repeat?
I don't know how you make that out, because on the transfers, for an academic point, they both more or less split in terms of the transfers from the Renewal candidate. I think you have to be careful. I would acknowledge that by-elections are different to general elections. And of course, you bring in a lot of new personalities into a general election scenario. We will have a strong Carlow candidate, for example, and we will have now two strong candidates in John McGuinness and Bobby Aylward on the Kilkenny side. What was good for us, I think, was the foundation stone that was created in the local elections last May. We had a very strong councillor base in Carlow and in Kilkenny, and our councillors were very connected to their communities, and they were actually very strong in assisting us in this election campaign. The general election will be a completely different battleground to the by-election campaign, and I think I would acknowledge that. But nonetheless, you fight the battles that you have.
Okay, and given that this by-election,
in football parlance, you play the team that's up against you when you're playing them, and I think we did that effectively on this occasion.
And just on that, in terms of the transfers, do you think this by-election did show something that will be interesting in the general election, is to see whether Fianna Fáil has become less transfer toxic than we saw in the last general?
I think so. I think that is an important pattern. I think the Aylwards had a lot to do with that, to be honest, and Bob in particular. And they were very clear in the beginning of the campaign that they didn't want any sort of negative campaigning. They wanted to promote themselves in terms of a positive campaign. And actually, I think that did assist in attracting transfers from across the board. He did very well on transfers. And I think it's a fair point that you have made, that on the next occasion, I think we will be more transfer-friendly than perhaps we were in previous elections. And in the sort of multi-party system that we're in currently, that would be an important asset to have going into the next general election. I would also say that the issues were also important. I mean, the government is unpopular. There's a lot of social division out there. The housing issue is a particularly serious crisis, with children staying in
let's stick
for example, emergency accommodation.
Let's stick with Friday for a moment. And one of the issues I want to talk to you about is the Liberal agenda, of course, in the same-sex marriage vote. The Taoiseach are talking about repeal the 8th. Labour will be campaigning on it, and if in government, will try to put it on the programme for government if they're back. What about Fianna Fáil? What's your position on repeal the 8th?
Well, I think I've already said, first of all, on issues to do with life or death, we have decided that it's a conscience issue for every member of the parliamentary party. So any issues that come before the next Dáil in relation to those issues will be decided on in that manner, in terms of an issue of conscience, and TDs will be free to vote in accordance with their conscience. But as a party, we will not be proposing, and going into the election, proposing the repeal of the 8th. And I think that will need a lot of significant debate and discussion. It's one thing to say repeal, but what does one replace that with, because fundamentally I'm pro-life. I believe in that as a principle, notwithstanding the complications and the very serious issues that are involved in that. And it's not something that I think lends itself to just very simplistic declarations to the effect of we'll repeal something without quite knowing what one will replace it with. But may I also say that I think, in terms of the marriage equality referendum, I want to pay a warm tribute to Niall Collins, our Director of Election, and to Avril Power, our Deputy Director, who put in a huge effort throughout the campaign, and also Ógra Fianna Fáil, our youth wing, who reflected perhaps the mobilisation of young people across the country in this referendum to a degree that we haven't witnessed before, and I think which is good and important for democracy. The young people within our party certainly gave an outstanding lead in terms of their commitment and energy and enthusiasm for this referendum, and I think the registration of so many young people is a positive for our democratic system.
And what do you say, Micheál Martin? For instance, Matty McGrath is here in studio. He's one of the very few TDs who voted no, but 40% nearly of the population voted no. What do you say to them, and who in the political system should be representing them?
I don't actually accept that premise that, when it comes to the Constitution, and which is ultimately the guarantor of basic civil rights, that ultimately that is actually a matter for the people. And in many ways, the Constitution is in writing. We have a written Constitution to check the power of the Oireachtas, or the power of politicians, and to limit, to a certain extent, when it comes to fundamental issues of civil rights, their influence and power. And so I think that's looking at it through the wrong prism from my perspective. The whole idea of a referendum is to say, let's put this issue to the people and let the people decide. And if you believe in a particular principle, then you should follow through on that principle. I do not believe in opposition for the sake of opposing. I do not believe in the concept that, let's test the opinion poll and there's 30% against, somebody in the Parliament should now automatically go with that idea or that position. I don't think that makes sense at all. And I think, we're proud as a political party that put Bunreacht na hÉireann in place in 1937. It's a living document. It evolves with jurisprudence. It evolves with referenda, and people can add clauses and subtract clauses.
So you don't believe there's a gap in the political market then?
I don't actually. I do not, because I think the spectrum is wide. Even within the no vote, there's a wide spectrum of opinion and perspectives. And I respect people who voted no, and I understand reasons why many people voted no. They had their reasons. The good thing is, I think overall, we were in a position to have a robust and tolerant debate that I think reflected well on our constitutional framework, on our democracy, and that other countries, if I may say so, could learn from, in a world where democracy, to a certain extent, is in decline.
You mentioned Niall Collins, of course, and you also mentioned your campaigning Senator Avril Power. There are maybe many other people in the parliamentary party who could have learned from that work rate and weren't as obvious and weren't as committed. Do they need a bit of a boot of energy?
Well, I think in some respects, let's be honest about this. Across the board, there are varying people with varying degrees of energy and commitment. Quite a lot of our parliamentary party members, people like Charlie McConalogue, Darragh Killéry, Billy Kelleher, Robert Troy, for example, all put their shoulder to the wheel with others. And so I was quite happy with the level of engagement and commitment. And as I said earlier, I was particularly happy with Ógra Fianna Fáil's commitment to it.
All right, Micheál Martin, thank you very much indeed, and thank you for joining us from Kilkenny, and congratulations on the addition of that extra TD to your ranks, and to Bobby Aylward.